So this is part 2 of the dimensioning video. In this, I'm going to talk about some of the dimensioning rules and how to get started. So we've already set up our dimensioning style, and on our junior drafting booklet, we have here, if we scroll down to our 20 dimensioning rules, so after viewports, here we go, 20 dimensioning rules to consider. So I'm going to go through these briefly. This is more for you to read and less for me to read to you, but I'll go through some of the important ones that you're going to need to get started, and then more or less how I think you should get started with dimensioning. Dimensions, first of all, is just assigning a numeric value. All it is showing the length or diameter or whatever numeric value of a part on your assignment. It's important to provide clarity for whoever is going to eventually make this thing. They need to know what value to input. So dimensioning carefully and without error is important. So it starts with, unfortunately, dimensioning rules are violated frequently. These errors have appeared so often and for so long they're accepted without question by many drawing makers and users. Violations, however, are dangerous and expensive because they introduce ambiguity, multiple interpretations, and guesswork into the manufacturing process. Before a company can eliminate errors, it must be able to recognize them. So we get these 20 rules. And this is what's called ANSI standard. These are just a few. There are thousands of these rules, but here's 20 kind of important ones. The first one, very important, each dimension should be given clearly so that it can be interpreted in only one way. So you basically have to think of what is the easiest way to represent what I'm trying to tell, as opposed to making it more complicated for the person trying to make this. So giving clearly interpreted in only one way. Dimension figures should never be crowded or in any way be difficult to read. So as much as you can, possibly space out your dimensions so they're not squished and difficult to read. Dimensions should not be duplicated or the same information given two different ways. So I'll show an example of this. So what that would mean is, so here's my front, top, and right side view. So if I was to tell you here, I measure this item and it has a height of 4. Duplicating this would be going here and tell me that this has a height of 4. And what people often forget when they're dimensioning orthographic assignments is these are 3 views of the same thing, right? So if this was me, this is me standing and looking at you from the front, this is me from the right side, and this is me from the top. So from me standing and looking at you from the front to the right side, I haven't shape-shifted and gotten any taller. So ultimately, you've told me this dimension 2 times. It's the same, it means the same thing. You're not providing clarity, you're just kind of making things cluttered. So you really only need to keep one of these. Another example of this would be you telling me the width here, the width is 6, and then telling me once again the width here, that this is 6. You're giving me the same information just in 2 different places, and really it's just going to start to clutter up your assignment. So pick one, commit, and keep it. You don't need both. One of the next rules, dimensions should be given so that it will not be necessary for the machinist to calculate, scale, or assume any dimensions. So basically you want to put numeric values on everything. You don't want to leave anything blank. Even if something looks the same, you still need to dimension everything, because you don't want them to have to assume anything, because frankly things can be different by a very small fraction of an inch or a millimeter, and to the eye on paper they may look the same. So you got to put on all the dimensions. Number 5, dimensioning to hidden lines should be avoided wherever possible. So for example, on this assignment, you could dimension from the end to here and tell me that value. But I think we can avoid that. We can avoid that by putting the dimension here. And what that does is it now puts that same piece of information that you were going to tell me, it puts it here where it's not cutting through the object, it's not going to a dimension line. In this situation, it can be avoided. In other situations, you can't always avoid dimensioning to a hidden line, and you're going to have to, and that's okay. Just try your best not to where you don't need to. Dimensions applying to 2 adjacent views should be placed between views, unless clarity is promoted by placing some of them outside. So there's an easier way to say this. What that rule is trying to tell you is kind of like this. You don't want to dimension here. We're going to call this like no man's land. Between the object and the border. You really don't want to place any dimensions here if you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't. In that case, sure, put dimensions in this area. But let's try this as an example. If we want to do the length of this object, some of you may be inclined to put it up here, which I don't blame you. However, it's better to put it between adjacent views by putting it here. You could put it on this view, or you could put it on this view. And you can, it portrays the same information as putting it up here, whereas up here is frowned upon. You want to leave the borders around here between the object and the border free in case someone needs to make notes or write on or make. You want to leave the space clear so it's nice and clean, and it gives people a place to make notes. So this no man's land we'll get rid of, and we can do that same thing by just putting the dimension here. Oh, I'm in the wrong layer. We'll go back into the dimension layer. Same information tells the same thing, it's just in a different place, as opposed to putting the dimension up here. And frankly, this is the first thing I look for when I'm marking your assignments, is I check this area first to make sure that there's no dimensions here if it can be avoided. Sometimes it can't, most of the time it can. Moving on to the next rule. Longer dimensions should be placed outside all intermediate dimensions so that dimension lines will not cross extension lines. So this is what they're trying to say. So we have, let's get rid of the 6 for a second. We have this here, we're going to dimension this number 2, and then I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to dimension it, sure, like this. And then I need to dimension the 6. So what this is telling you is that the bigger dimension should always be on the outside, and the smaller dimensions need to be moved on the inside, so they're not crossing. And also crossing looks messy. So we don't want to cross them if possible. We don't want to do this. We want to keep them inside, just like this. Number 8. We don't need to talk about this. Number 9. A dimension should be attached to only one view, not two extension lines connecting two views. So what they mean by that is, if you want to tell me that this has a height of 4, you don't need to pull it all the way through another assignment to show me that all of that has a height of 4. This is bad form, and you're telling me the same information in a really improper way. So drag it in here. It only needs to go on one. It doesn't need to extend between two views. Detailed dimensions should line up in a chain fashion. So these here, you want to try your best to line them up. These are the same detail, they're on the same level. You want to line them up so they're nice and side by side, like so. So that you don't have them kind of wonky all over the place, one higher than the other. A complete chain of detailed dimensions should be avoided. It is better to omit one. So what that means is, you don't need to have this. You don't need to have 2, 2, 2, and 6. This is like way too much information. Really, if you tell me that the overall length is 6, and then you tell me this is 2 and this is 2, I really don't need this third one. It's too much information. So that would be a chain of dimensions where you omit one. So in a chain with an overall dimension, you always want to omit one of them because it's frankly like way too much information. Let's see if we have to do any more of these. A dimension line should never be drawn through a dimension figure, so you don't want to cross through. They should try to space them uniformly. We don't need to talk about that. You don't want them to cross if possible. Leaders, we don't need to talk about that yet. When you're dimensioning a circle, you should dimension it with diameter and an arc by a radius. And notes, so we'll talk about those. Notes should be brief and clear. So how notes work, these are always going to go in the top right corner. You're going to grab your text, and you're going to make a text box over here. And your notes are a standard form, and it's going to say the same thing in all of your assignments. So it'll be like this, all capitals, notes, and then the new line. This is where you tell me what units the dimensions are in. In this case, they're in inches, so we go all dimensions in inches. And this is it. That's all that your notes have to say. Notes, no colon, no underline, just notes, all dimensions in inches. Because here it just says 2. 2 what? Right? 2 millimeters, 2 micrometers, 2 like elephants, 2 what? And in this case, it's inches. So that's where your notes will go. They're always going to go in this spot. And you can literally just copy and paste this on all of your layouts. So now that we've done this, let's just do a quick recap of how you get started with dimensioning. We know what we're not supposed to do, but let's look at more of a positive approach. What are we supposed to do? So the first things I want you to indicate on all of your drawings are overall length, overall width, and overall height. You always start with this. So we're going to go overall length here from end to end, overall height, and overall width. So once you have these 3 dimensions, then you just look at what's missing, right? So we can't dimension this to the hidden line. We talked about that already. We can indicate that maybe here. And then we have these measurements here that we haven't indicated. Now you can put them here, you can put them here, or you can put them on this view. It's really up to you. Just whatever you do, make it clear. You don't want it to be messy. We're going to try to line these up as best as we can. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's do that again. Click, click, and now I can try to line them up. Oh my goodness, what is with this? Why are you jumping out here? There we go. 2, 2, and 6. So as far as I'm concerned, this assignment is done. You have your notes, you have your length, width, height, you have all the detailed dimensions, you're ready to go. So you're going to make sure that you do this on all of your assignments, and it's really easy to take your notes and simply Control-C and copy them, and go to your drawing 2, Control-V, and paste them. Like, super easy to do this, and you can paste it on all of your assignments, and you don't have to retype it. This one's just awaiting dimensions. So this is part 2 of your dimensioning video.